I stood there in the warm glow of the honeymoon suite, watching Mira unpack her suitcase with that little smile I'd fallen in love with years ago. Everything felt perfect, like a dream I didn't want to wake up from. Just a week ago, we'd gotten married under a sky full of stars, string lights twinkling above us as we danced our first dance. The wedding wasn't big, but it was ours, small, romantic, unforgettable. Her parents, Clara and Marshall, had been all over the planning, picking flowers and fussing over table settings. I didn't mind much then. I figured they were just excited to see their only daughter tie the knot. Mira looked so happy that night, her white dress glowing in the moonlight as we whispered promises to each other. I thought that was it, the start of forever. But then, out of nowhere, just days after the wedding, Clara and Marshall suggested something odd. A family trip, they called it. Just Mira and them, heading off to Scottsdale for what they said was a relaxing getaway. It hit me like a punch to the gut. We'd barely been married a week, and they wanted to whisk her away already? I didn't love the idea, honestly. It stung. But Myra's eyes lit up when they brought it up. She squeezed my hand and said, "It's just a few days, babe. I'll be back before you know it." I didn't want to be the guy who says no, the jealous husband who can't let his wife breathe. So I swallowed the unease, nodded, and said, "Sure, go have fun." I thought I was being understanding, supportive even. Looking back now, that was my first mistake, and it's one I'll never stop kicking myself for. The moment I agreed, something shifted, like a crack forming in a glass you don't notice until it shatters. I drove her to the airport, kissed her goodbye, and watched her walk off with Clara and Marshall, their suitcases rolling behind them. Clara gave me this tight little smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes, and Marshall just nodded, his face blank as always. I told myself it was fine. She'd be back in 4 days, and we'd pick up right where we left off, newlyweds, head over heels, building our life together. I went home that night, sat on our couch, and stared at the empty space where she'd usually be curled up next to me. The house felt too quiet without her laugh, her humming as she made tea. I tried to shake it off, told myself I was overthinking things. "It's just a trip," I kept repeating in my head. Just a trip. But deep down, I couldn't shake this gnawing feeling, like I'd just handed her over to something I didn't understand. I flipped on the TV, scrolled through my phone, anything to keep busy. I even texted her a quick, "Miss you already," with a heart emoji, hoping she'd reply fast. She did, a simple "miss you too," with a smiley face. That should have calmed me down, right? But it didn't. That night, I barely slept, tossing and turning in our too-big bed, wondering why her parents couldn't wait a little longer to drag her off. Why now? Why so soon? The next morning, I woke up to a picture she sent, her standing by a pool, sunglasses on, smiling wide. "Having fun already," she wrote. I stared at it for a long time, trying to feel happy for her. She looked beautiful like always. But something about the photo felt off, like there was a piece missing I couldn't see. I texted back, "Glad you're enjoying it. Tell Clara and Marshall hi." She didn't reply for hours, and when she did, it was just, "They say hi back." No details, no little stories about her day like she usually sent. I brushed it off. Maybe she was busy. Maybe she was just relaxing like they said. But that twist in my gut wouldn't go away. By day 2, I was pacing the house, replaying every moment of the wedding in my head. Clara's comments about my job, "It's nice you're so practical," and Marshall's silent stares started to feel heavier. I didn't get why they'd pushed so hard for this trip. Was it really just a family thing? Or was there something else going on? I didn't know it then, but that question would change everything. I'd find out soon enough that the honeymoon glow, the one I thought would last forever, was already fading, and I was the last one to see it. I stood in the kitchen that morning, flipping pancakes like I was some kind of hero, trying to make everything feel normal again. Mira had come back from Scottsdale the night before, and I'd picked her up from the airport with a big grin, expecting her to leap into my arms like she used to. But she didn't. She just gave me this small, tired smile and a quick hug before sliding into the passenger seat. The whole drive home, she stared out the window, barely saying a word. I asked how the trip was, and she mumbled, "Fine, just relaxing," without looking at me. I figured she was exhausted. 4 days with her parents would wear anyone out, right? So I let it go, told myself she'd bounce back after a good night's sleep. But now, standing there with the smell of syrup filling the air, I could feel it. Something was wrong. She sat across from me at the table, her hair still messy from bed, wearing one of my old shirts that used to make me smile seeing her in it. Today, it didn't. She poked at her food with her fork, not eating, just moving it around like she was lost in her head. I tried to catch her eye, but she wouldn't look up. Her laugh, that bright sound I'd hear every morning, was gone. Her hand didn't reach for mine like it always did when we ate together. It was like she was sitting there, but she wasn't really with me. I cleared my throat, tried to lighten things up. So what did you do down there? Swim a lot. Get a tan. She shrugged, still staring at her plate. Yeah, some of that. That was it. Just flat. No spark. I waited, hoping she'd say more, but she didn't. The silence stretched out, heavy and thick, until finally, she put her fork down and looked at me. Her eyes were different, cold, like a wall had gone up between us. I think we should take a break, she said, her voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it. My chest tightened, but I didn't let it show. I didn't yell or ask why or beg her to take it back. I just sat there, staring at her, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. A break? We'd been married for less than 2 weeks. My mind raced, but my face stayed calm. Too calm, maybe. I leaned back in my chair, took a slow sip of coffee, and then I smiled. Not a happy smile, but one that said I wasn't surprised, not really. That's funny, I said, standing up and walking over to the counter where I'd left it, the folder. I picked it up, feeling its weight in my hand, and slid it across the table to her. Because I just got some information on that trip. Her eyes flicked to the folder, then back to me, confused. She hesitated, like she wasn't sure she wanted to touch it, but curiosity got the better of her. She pulled it closer, flipped it open, and started reading. The first page was just words, names, dates, a summary Marcus had typed up, but then she turned to the next one, and I saw her breath catch. She flipped faster, her fingers trembling as she went through the stack. Photos spilled out, grainy shots of her by the pool, at a restaurant, on a beach. Her eyes widened, darting over every image, every detail. I stood there, arms crossed, watching her face change, shock, then panic, then something else I couldn't name. She stopped on one photo, staring at it hard, her hands shaking so bad the paper rattled. It was her and him. Theo, laughing together, his arms slung around her shoulder like they'd known each other forever. Clara and Marshall were in the background, smiling like proud parents at a school play. Myra's head snapped up, her gaze locking onto mine for the first time that morning. "What is this?" she whispered, but before I could answer, the front door creaked open behind her. I didn't flinch. I'd heard the car pull up, the footsteps on the porch. Clara and Marshall stepped into the room, all casual like they'd just popped by for coffee. Clara's voice was bright, too bright. "Hope we're not interrupting anything," she said, setting a binder of wedding photos on the counter. Marshall just nodded at me, his face blank as ever. Mira didn't move, didn't turn around. She just kept staring at me, then flicked her eyes to her parents, the folder still open in front of her. I leaned against the counter, sipping my coffee again, letting the moment hang there. She wanted a break? Fine. But she was about to find out what that trip really was, and I wasn't the one who'd have to explain it. I stood in our living room, staring at the spot where Myra's suitcase had been before she left for that trip. The moment she walked out the door with Clara and Marshall, something in me twisted, a knot I couldn't untie. It wasn't just that they'd taken her away so soon after the wedding. It was the way they did it, like it was their right, like I didn't even factor in. Clara had never liked me. I'd known that from the start. She'd drop little jabs about my job, my clothes, my simple life, always with that fake smile plastered on her face. "You're so practical," she'd say, like it was an insult. Marshall was different, quiet, always watching me with those cold, calculating eyes, like he was sizing me up and finding me lacking. I brushed it off before, told myself it didn't matter what they thought as long as Mira loved me. But when they suggested that family trip, out of the blue, just days after I put a ring on her finger, it hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I didn't say no, I should have, but I didn't. Instead, I let her go, waved her off at the airport, and came home to an empty house. That first night alone, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing her laughing with them, relaxing by some fancy pool, while I sat here like an idiot, waiting. By the second day, that twist in my gut turned into something sharper, doubt. Why did they need her now? What was so urgent? I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it, something they weren't telling me. That's when I picked up the phone and called Marcus. He's my cousin, a private investigator down in Scottsdale, the kind of guy who doesn't ask too many questions if you're family. Hey, man, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Myra's down there with her parents. Can you keep an eye on them? Follow them? Maybe. Especially if someone else shows up. He didn't hesitate. You got it, he said. Anything specific I'm looking for? I paused, not sure how to put it. Just anything that doesn't feel right. I don't know, something's off. He didn't push, just told me he'd get on it and call me back. I hung up, feeling a little stupid but mostly relieved. If it was nothing, I'd laugh it off later. If it wasn't, well, I'd deal with that when it came. Less than 48 hours later, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Check your email. You're gonna want to see this. I grabbed my laptop, heart pounding, and opened the message. There it was, a folder full of files. Videos, photos, receipts, timestamps. I clicked the first video, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't some quiet family retreat. There was Mira, sitting at a restaurant table, laughing, her hair catching the sunlight. Clara and Marshall were there too, but they weren't the problem. It was the guy next to her, some tan, smug-looking jerk with a grin that screamed money. Theo, Marcus called him in the notes. Some rich investor's son, dripping in fake charm, leaning too close to my wife. I watched as he said something, and she laughed again, her real laugh, the one I hadn't heard in days. Clara clapped her hands like it was the best thing she'd ever seen, and Marshall nodded along, all proud. I clicked through the photos next, dinners, drinks by the pool, walks on the beach. Theo's arm around her shoulder, her smiling up at him. Clara snapping pictures like it was a damn photo shoot. Receipts showed they'd all stayed at the same hotel, some swanky place I'd never afford. Marcus even got a shot of Theo handing Mira a drink, their hands brushing, and she didn't pull away. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling the blood drain from my face. My wife, my brand new wife, wasn't on a relaxing getaway with her parents. She was being paraded around like a prize, introduced to some guy they'd picked out for her. And she didn't push him away. She didn't call me, didn't text me, didn't say a word about any of it. I closed the laptop, my hand shaking, and just sat there in the dark. The house was quiet, but my head was screaming. I trusted her. I trusted them. And this was what I got. It broke me, not in a loud, crashing way, but slow and deep, like a crack splitting through everything I thought we had. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just waited for her to come home, knowing nothing would ever be the same. I stood in our living room, leaning against the counter with my coffee mug in hand, watching the chaos unfold like it was some kind of twisted play I'd bought tickets to. Mira sat at the table, still clutching that folder I'd handed her, her eyes darting between the photos and her parents like she couldn't decide who to yell at first. Clara and Marshall had just walked in, perfect timing, really, acting like nothing was wrong. Clara set that binder of wedding photos down with a little thud, her voice all chipper as she said, "Hope we're not interrupting." I almost laughed right there, but I held it in, took a slow sip of my coffee instead. The bitterness matched the moment. Myra's hands were shaking as she flipped through the pictures again. Dinners with Theo, drinks by the pool, that smug jerk grinning at her like he'd already won something. She'd been quiet since she opened the folder, but now she looked up, her voice sharp and low. "What is this?" She wasn't asking me, though. Her eyes were locked on Clara, who stood there with that tight, fake smile she always wore when she was cornered. Marshall didn't even look up from his phone, just kept scrolling like this was all boring to him. "We just wanted you to meet someone new," Clara said, waving her hand like it was no big deal. "You didn't give us a chance before the wedding, Mira. It was all too rushed, don't you think?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Too rushed? They'd had months to say something, to object, to pull their little stunts before I put a ring on her finger. But no, they waited until after the vows, after the cake, after we danced under those damn string lights. I set my mug down, the clink loud in the tense air, and crossed my arms. Myra's head snapped toward her mom, her face going red. "Meet someone new? Are you serious?" Clara shrugged, like she was explaining why she'd picked a different wine for dinner. "We thought you'd like him. Theo's a good match, successful, charming. We didn't get to weigh him before, so we figured, we?" Mira cut in, her voice rising. "Who's we?" "You and Dad." Marshall finally glanced up, his face blank as ever. "We just wanted to see you happy," he muttered, like that explained everything. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I laughed. It came out loud and bitter, bouncing off the walls. "Happy," I said, stepping closer to the table. "You think dragging her off to meet some rich guy a week after our wedding is about her happiness?" Myra's eyes flicked to me, wide and glassy, but I wasn't done. "You set her up with him, dinners, drinks, beach walks, like she's some prize to hand off. And you, I pointed at Clara. You're standing there acting like it's normal to pimp out your married daughter. Clara's smile dropped, her lips pressing into a thin line. Don't be crude, she snapped. It wasn't like that. We just gave her an option. An option? Myra's voice broke as she shoved the folder away, papers sliding across the table. I'm married. I didn't ask for options. She stood up, her chair scraping the floor, and turned to me. I didn't know they were planning this, I swear. I stared at her, my jaw tight. Did I believe her? Part of me wanted to. God, I wanted to. But those photos were burned into my head. Her laughing with Theo, his arm around her, her not pulling away. You didn't know? I said slowly. But you didn't stop it either, did you? Her mouth opened, then closed, like she didn't have an answer. Clara jumped in, her voice sharp now. Oh, come on, Mira, don't act so innocent. You enjoyed yourself down there. We all saw it. That hit me like a slap. I looked at Mira, waiting for her to deny it, to say something, anything, to prove Clara wrong. But she just stood there, her hands clenched at her sides, her eyes dropping to the floor. I didn't mean for it to happen like that, she whispered. Like what? I pressed, stepping closer. Like you flirting with some guy your parents picked out while I was sitting here thinking you were just relaxing? She flinched, but I didn't back off. You let them take you there, Mira. You let them parade you around like I didn't exist. Marshall cleared his throat, finally putting his phone down. Let's not blow this out of proportion, he said, his tone calm, like he was negotiating a deal. No one forced her to do anything. She could have said no. I turned on him, my voice steady but cold. And you could have stayed out of my marriage. But here we are. The room went quiet, the weight of it all pressing down on us. Clara crossed her arms. Marshall went back to his phone, and Mira just stood there, looking lost. I picked up my coffee again, took a sip, and let the silence stretch. They thought they could play this off like it was nothing. But I wasn't letting it go that easy. I stood there in the living room, my coffee long gone cold in my hand, watching Mira tremble like a leaf caught in a storm. She was still on her feet, the folder of photos scattered across the table like a crime scene, her eyes bouncing between me and her parents. Clara's words hung in the air. We just gave her an option, and I could feel the heat rising in my chest. But I kept it locked down, my face hard as stone. Myra's voice cracked as she turned to her mom. Are you telling me you flew me out there to meet someone else after my wedding? She sounded like she couldn't believe it, like she was hoping Clara would laugh and say it was all a big misunderstanding. But Clara didn't laugh. She scoffed instead, rolling her eyes like Mira was being a kid throwing a tantrum. Sweetheart, don't be so dramatic, she said, smoothing her hair back. We didn't force you into anything. We just wanted options on the table, that's all. Options. Like my wife was a car they were test driving, and Theo was the shiny new model they'd rather park in the garage. I couldn't wrap my head around it, how they could stand there, so calm, so smug, acting like this was normal. Marshall finally piped up, his voice flat and steady, like he was reading a grocery list. Look, Mira, you rushed into this marriage. We didn't get a say. We were just thinking long-term for you, for the family. That's when I lost it, not loud, not yelling, but a laugh ripped out of me, sharp and ugly. It echoed in the room, cutting through their excuses like a knife. Long-term, I said, setting my mug down hard enough to make the table shake. You arranged for your married daughter to flirt with some guy you handpicked like he's a job candidate? You think that's thinking long-term? I turned to Mira, my eyes locking on hers. And you, what? You just went along with it. Her face went pale, her lips parting like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out at first. Then she shook her head fast, her hands flying up. I didn't know they were doing this. Her voice was desperate, pleading, but it didn't hit me the way it used to. I stepped closer, my voice low and tight. Didn't know what, Mira? That he'd kiss your cheek while your mom snapped a photo? That they'd have you laughing and drinking with him like I wasn't waiting back? She froze, her eyes wide, and I could see it. She was replaying it all in her head, every moment I'd seen in those pictures. I didn't, she started, but I cut her off, holding up the photo that had been stuck in my mind since I saw it. Theo's arm around her, her smiling up at him, Clara grinning in the background. You didn't what? I asked. You didn't smile? You didn't let him get close? You didn't enjoy it? She stared at the picture, her hands dropping to her sides, and I could tell she was about to crack. Her mouth opened, her breath hitching like she was going to scream or cry or both. But before she could, Her phone buzzed on the table, loud and sharp, breaking the moment. She flinched, glancing down at it, and I saw the name flash on the screen, Leona, her best friend from Scottsdale. Mira grabbed it, her fingers clumsy, and read the text out loud, her voice shaking. Theo's still in town, bragging that you two were meant to be, that your parents promised him everything. The words hit like a punch, and she looked up slow, her eyes locking on Clara. What does that mean? She whispered. Clara didn't even blink, just tilted her head like it was no big deal. We may have encouraged him a little, she said, her tone light, like she was admitting to buying him a coffee. But he misunderstood. We just gave him a small gift, invited him to dinner. Nothing serious. Myra's jaw dropped, and she stared at her mom like she'd never seen her before. You promised him I'd leave my husband? She asked, her voice rising, cracking at the edges. Clara shrugged, actually shrugged, like it was all just a silly mix-up. We wanted what's best for you, sweetheart. Theo's a catch. We thought you'd see that. I just stood there, watching it all fall apart, my arms crossed tight across my chest. Mira turned to me, her face a mess of shock and guilt. I didn't know, she said again, softer this time, like she was begging me to believe her. But I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because even if she didn't know the whole plan, she'd still gone along with it, smiling, laughing, letting Theo in while I was here, alone, thinking she was mine. The room went quiet, except for the faint hum of Myra's phone still buzzing with Leona's messages. Clara adjusted her purse, Marshall checked his watch, and Mira just stood there, looking like she might explode. Me? I stayed still, letting it sink in. My wife, my marriage, my whole damn life was a game to them, and I was the only one who hadn't been clued in. I leaned against the counter in the living room, my arms still crossed, watching Mira clutch her phone like it was a lifeline. That text from Leona, Theo's still in town, bragging that you two were meant to be, that your parents promised him everything, hung in the air like smoke, choking the room. Myra's voice had trembled when she read it out loud, and now she was staring at Clara, her eyes wide and wet, waiting for an answer. What does that mean? She'd asked, her words sharp but fragile, like glass about to break. Clara didn't even flinch, just tilted her head with that smug little smile she always had, like she was above it all. We may have encouraged him, she said, her voice smooth and casual, like she was talking about picking out curtains. But he misunderstood. We just gave him a little gift, invited him to dinner. Nothing criminal, Mira. I almost choked on the air. A little gift? Dinner? This wasn't some friendly meet and greet. They'd flown her out there, paraded her around with this guy, and now they were acting like it was no big deal. Myra's head snapped back, her mouth open like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. You promised him I'd leave my husband? She said, her voice climbing higher, shaking harder. Clara shrugged, like it was nothing. We wanted what's best for you, she said. Theo's a good man, successful, from a solid family. We thought you'd see that eventually. I stood there, my jaw tight, feeling the anger bubble up, but keeping it locked down. Best for her? They didn't give a damn about what she wanted, or what I wanted. This was their game, their rules, and I was just the guy in the way. Mira turned to me, her face pale, her eyes pleading. I didn't know, she said again, like it was the only thing she could say. I swear, I didn't know they were planning this. I looked at her, really looked at her, and all I could see were those photos, her laughing with Theo, his arm around her, her not pushing him away. You didn't know? I said, my voice low and steady. But you didn't stop it either, did you? She flinched, her hands twisting together, and I could tell she was scrambling for something to say. It wasn't like that, she whispered. I thought it was just friendly. I didn't think. You didn't think. I cut in, stepping closer. You didn't think it'd look bad to let some guy hang all over you while your parents cheered him on? You didn't think to call me, to tell me what was going on. She shook her head fast, tears starting to spill over. I didn't want to worry you. I thought it was nothing, just mom and dad being them. I laughed, short and bitter. Them? You mean the people who think our marriage is a mistake they can fix with a better offer? Clara jumped in, her voice sharp now. That's enough, she said, pointing at me. You're blowing this out of proportion. We didn't force her to do anything. She could have walked away. Walked away. I turned on her, my voice rising for the first time. You flew her out there, stuck her in a hotel with this guy, and fed her lies about how he's her future. What was she supposed to do? Run back home with no car, no plan, while you two kept pushing? Marshall cleared his throat, finally looking up from his phone. Let's calm down, he said, his tone flat. No one's saying we planned a divorce. We just thought she'd see reason. Reason. That word hit me like a brick. They thought I was the unreasonable one, the guy she'd married, the guy she'd promised to love, the guy who'd been waiting here like a fool while they played matchmaker. Mira sank back into her chair, her hands covering her face. I can't believe this, she muttered. I can't believe you'd do this to me. Clara sighed, like she was tired of explaining herself. Mira, we've always wanted you to have the best. This marriage, it was fast. We didn't get a chance to guide you. Guide me. Myra's head shot up, her voice cracking. You think setting me up with some guy behind my husband's back is guiding me? I watched her, waiting to see if she'd turn that anger on me too. Blame me for digging this up, for putting it all out there. But she didn't. She just sat there, staring at her parents like they were strangers. I didn't sleep with him, she said suddenly, looking at me now. I didn't. I wouldn't do that. Her eyes were begging me to believe her, but I didn't say anything. I just nodded once, letting her words sit there. Maybe she didn't sleep with him, but she'd let him in, let them all in, and that cut just as deep. The room went quiet again, the tension thick enough to choke on. Clara adjusted her purse, Marshall tapped his phone, and Mira wiped her eyes. I stayed where I was, watching my wife realize she'd been a pawn in their game, and wondering if she'd ever really been mine at all. I stood in the kitchen the next day, staring at the coffee pot like it could fix everything if I just brewed it strong enough. After that blowout with Mira and her parents, I'd slept on the couch, not because she asked me to, but because I couldn't stand being in our bed, smelling her shampoo on the pillows, pretending everything was fine. She'd gone upstairs after Clara and Marshall left, her face red and puffy from crying, and I didn't follow. I needed space, time to think, time to figure out what came next. The folder was still on the table, photos peeking out like a bad memory I couldn't shake. I'd shown her the truth, but it didn't feel like a win. It felt like a punch to the gut that kept on giving. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't letting this fester in the dark anymore. If Clara and Marshall wanted to play their little game, I'd drag it into the light for everyone to see. So I sent out invitations, short, simple texts to Clara, Marshall, Mira, Theo, and a handful of friends and family who'd been at the wedding. Photo shoot at the venue. I wrote, one last memory from the big day. Be there at 6. Clara replied right away with a cheery, oh, how lovely. We'll be there. Mira texted back a hesitant, is this necessary? I didn't sugarcoat it. Yeah, I wrote. It's time people knew the truth. She didn't argue after that, just sent a quiet, okay. The rest confirmed quick. Leona, Marcus, a few cousins who danced with us under those string lights. Even Theo RSVP'd with a cocky, wouldn't miss it. I smirked at that. Good. Let him walk right into it. That evening, I got to the venue early, the same place we'd gotten married, with its big open room and wooden beams, the spot where I'd thought we'd started something real. I set up a projector, hooked it to my laptop, and laid out the evidence Marcus had sent me. Photos, videos, receipts, all of it. The reception table was still there, the one we'd cut the cake on, and I dragged it to the center, piling the files on top. People started trickling in, Leona first, giving me a nod like she knew something was up. Then Marcus, who clapped me on the shoulder and said, you sure about this, man? I nodded. Yeah, no more hiding. Clara and Marshall showed up next. Clara in pearls like she was going to a gala. Marshall in his usual suit, phone already in hand. Mira came in behind them, quiet, her eyes darting to me and then away. She looked small, like the weight of it all was crushing her, but I didn't soften. Not yet. Then Theo swaggered in, tanned and grinning, acting like he owned the place. Nice spot, he said, winking at Mira. She didn't smile back. I waited until everyone was settled, about 20 people, some curious, some confused, then stepped to the front. Thanks for coming, I said, my voice steady. Thought we'd take a look back at the wedding and what's happened since. I clicked the projector on, and the first slide lit up the wall. A photo of Mira and me cutting the cake, smiling, happy. There were a few us from the crowd, but I didn't linger. Next slide, Scottsdale. Mira at the pool with Theo, his arm around her. A murmur rippled through the room. I clicked again, dinner, Theo leaning close, Clara laughing. Then the beach walk, the drinks, the hotel receipts. With every slide, the whispers grew louder, eyes darting to Mira, to her parents, to me. She sank lower in her chair, her hands over her face. Clara's smile tightened, but she didn't move. Theo shifted, looking less smug now. Then I played the video. Marcus had caught it from a distance, Clara's voice clear as day, saying, This marriage is just a phase. Theo's the real future. The room went dead silent, like someone had sucked the air out. I let it hang there, the words echoing, then turned the projector off. That's it, I said, crossing my arms. That's what they've been up to while I've been here, thinking I had a wife. Mira stood up fast, her chair scraping loud. I didn't know, she shouted, her voice breaking. I didn't plan this. I looked at her, my chest tight. Maybe not, I said. But you didn't stop it either. Clara jumped in, her voice sharp. This is ridiculous. You're making a scene over nothing. Theo nodded, trying to play it cool. Yeah, man, chill. It's not like we shut up, I snapped, cutting him off. You don't get to talk. He blinked, surprised, and sat back down. The room buzzed, friends whispering, cousins glaring at Clara and Marshall. Leona stood up, arms crossed. You guys are unbelievable, she said to Myra's parents. She's married, and you're shopping her around like she's for sale? Marshall finally spoke, his tone calm. It's not like that. We just gave Theo a chance to meet her. I laughed, cold and hard. A chance? You gave him a weekend suite and a promise. The truth was out now, raw and ugly, and I stood there, watching it sink in, wondering if I just burned everything down or set myself free. I stood in the middle of that venue, the projector still humming behind me, watching the room explode into silence so thick it felt like I could touch it. The video had just finished, Clara's voice saying, "This marriage is just a phase. Theo's the real future," and it was like a bomb had gone off, leaving nothing but stunned faces and wide eyes. Mira was on her feet, her hand shaking, her voice cracking as she yelled. I didn't know. I'd heard that line too many times now, and it didn't hit me the same anymore. I just looked at her, my arms crossed, and said, maybe not. But you didn't stop it either. That shut her up fast. She sank back into her chair, her face buried in her hands. Clara jumped in, her voice sharp and high, like she could still control this. This is ridiculous, she snapped, standing up straighter in her pearls. You're making a scene over nothing. Theo nodded, trying to back her up, his grin fading but still clinging to that cocky edge. Yeah, man, chill. It's not like we shut up, I said, my voice cutting through his like a blade. He blinked, startled, and sat back down, his hands up like he was surrendering. The room buzzed, friends whispering, cousins shooting glares at Clara and Marshall, Leona glaring like she wanted to throw punches. Then Mira found her voice again, turning to her parents. Mom, Dad, did you pay him? She asked, her words slow and heavy, like she was afraid of the answer. Marshall looked up from his phone, finally putting it down, his face blank as ever. A few gifts, he said, shrugging. A weekend suite. It's not illegal. Theo piped up, his voice softer now, like he was trying to save himself. I thought it was love, he said, glancing at Mira. She whipped around to face him, her eyes blazing. Love? You thought I'd just leave my husband because you showed up with a tan and a smile? I couldn't help it. I laughed, short and bitter. Guess he's not as smart as your parents thought. Theo's face went red, but he didn't say anything back. Mira turned to me, her eyes wet and desperate. I didn't know, she said again, stepping closer. I swear, I didn't sleep with him. I didn't, but you didn't stop it, I said, my voice steady, cutting her off. You let it happen. You laughed, smiled, shared drinks. You let them decide who you should end up with. She reached for my hand, her fingers brushing mine, but I pulled back. Don't, I said, and she froze, her arm dropping like it weighed a ton. The room was spinning now, everyone talking at once, voices overlapping. Theo turned on Clara, his cool cracking. You said she wanted out, he barked, pointing at her. Clara snapped back, her composure slipping. She would have, if he hadn't stuck his nose in. She jabbed a finger at me, her face twisting like I was the villain here. I just stood there, letting it all crash around me. Leona stepped forward, her arms crossed tight. You're disgusting, she said to Clara. She's your daughter, not some doll you can trade up when you don't like the groom. A few cousins nodded, muttering agreement, and one of them, my cousin Jake, called out, what kind of parents pull this crap? Clara spun on him, her voice rising. We were protecting her future. He's not good enough. She pointed at me again, and that was it. The room erupted. People shouting, chairs scraping, Mira crying louder now, saying, stop it, just stop, over and over. I didn't move, didn't yell back. I just watched, letting them tear each other apart. Marshall tried to play peacemaker, standing up with his hands out. Everyone calm down, he said, like he could still fix this. It's not what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. You tried to sell my wife to some rich kid because you didn't like me. And she let you try. Mira sobbed, shaking her head. I didn't mean to, but you did, I said, looking right at her. You didn't call me. You didn't walk away. You stayed. She crumpled, sitting back down, her hands over her face again. Theo stood up, grabbing his jacket. I'm out, he muttered, heading for the door. You people are crazy. Clara shouted after him. You're not innocent here. But he didn't stop. The cousins started arguing with Marshall. Leona was still ripping into Clara, and Mira just sat there, broken. I stepped back, leaning against the table, the folder still open behind me. The truth was out, ugly, loud, and messy, and I didn't feel better. I felt empty. Everyone knew now, but it didn't fix anything. Mira looked up at me, her eyes begging for something, forgiveness, maybe, or a way back. But I didn't have it to give. I'm sorry, she whispered, but I just shook my head. The chaos kept going, voices bouncing off the walls, but I tuned it out. This was their mess now. I'd done my part. I stood in the kitchen 2 weeks later, stirring a pot of soup I didn't even want, just trying to keep my hands busy. The fallout from that night at the venue hit fast and hard, like a storm I'd kicked up but couldn't control. Mira moved out the next day, packed a bag, said she needed space, and left without looking back. I didn't stop her. I didn't say much at all, just watched her go, the door clicking shut behind her like the end of something I'd been holding onto too tight. The house felt empty after that, too big and too quiet, but I didn't mind. It was better than pretending everything was fine. Clara and Marshall tried to spin it their way, calling up relatives and friends with some story about how it wasn't working out, and it was mutual. I heard it secondhand from my cousin Jake, Clara's voice all smooth and sad, like she was the victim here. They just weren't compatible, she'd said. We saw it coming. Compatible. That word stuck in my throat, bitter and wrong. They didn't care about compatibility when they were shoving Theo in her face, smiling for the camera while I sat here like a fool. But their little lie didn't hold up long. Theo couldn't keep his mouth shut. He started posting online, pictures from Scottsdale, tagging Mira in shots of them by the pool, at dinner, on the beach. Good times with good people. He captioned one, smirking in the frame. Then he dropped a video, him laughing, saying, her parents knew we were the real deal. That's when it blew up. Leona saw it first, sent me a screenshot with a quick, this idiot's digging his own grave. She wasn't wrong. The story spread fast. Friends shared it. Family called me asking what the hell was going on, and pretty soon it hit X, where people I didn't even know were picking it apart. Who does this to their own kid? One post read. Shady as hell, said another. Clara's event planning business took a hit. Vendors canceled, clients backed out, saying they didn't trust her anymore. Marshall got dropped from some board he'd been on, a quiet email letting him know his personal conduct didn't align with their values. Theo? He vanished, deleted his accounts, and went dark after the backlash hit. I didn't feel sorry for any of them. They'd made their bed, and now they were lying in it. Mira reached out after 2 weeks, a text that popped up while I was eating alone at the table. Can we talk? It said. I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let her sit with the mess she'd helped make. But I wasn't that guy. Not yet, anyway. Sure, I texted back. Come by tomorrow. She showed up at noon, standing on the porch like she wasn't sure she was welcome. I let her in, pointed to the couch, and sat across from her in the armchair. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back messy, like she hadn't slept much. I'm sorry, she started, her voice small. I know I keep saying that, but I mean it. I didn't see what they were doing until it was too late. I nodded, letting her talk, my hands resting on my knees. I didn't want Theo, she said, looking at me now. I didn't want any of it. I didn't know how to stop them. They've always been like that, pushing, pulling, deciding what's best for me. I should have told you. I should have left. Yeah, I said, my voice flat. You should have. She winced, but I didn't soften it. You weren't just married to me, Mira, I went on. You were married to them. Every step of the way, they had their hands on you, and you let them. Her eyes filled up, tears spilling over, but I didn't move. I messed up, she said, wiping her face. I know I did, but I love you. I still do. Those words hit me hard, stirring up something I'd buried under all the anger and hurt. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the girl I danced with under the string lights, the one I'd promised forever to. But I also saw the girl in those photos, laughing with Theo, letting her parents steer her away from me. I believe you, I said finally, slow and careful. But that doesn't fix it. You didn't fight for us. You didn't even try. And I can't forget that. She cried harder, nodding like she'd expected it. I don't know how to make it right, she said. You can't, I told her, standing up. Not now. Maybe not ever. She stayed for a while, crying, talking, begging me to give her a chance, but I didn't budge. When she left, the house went quiet again, and I sat there, staring at the spot where she'd been. I wasn't mad anymore, not like before. I just felt done. The world knew the truth now, and so did I. That was enough for today, at least. I stood in the middle of the venue again, the same one where Mira and I had gotten married, but this time it felt different, like a weight had lifted, even if the scars were still there. It was a month after she'd moved out, a month since that messy night with the projector and the shouting, a month since the world saw what her parents had tried to pull. Tonight, I wasn't here to fight or prove anything. I was here to let it go. I'd invited my real family, my real friends, the people who'd stuck by me through all this crap. No Clara, no Marshall, no Theo, no Mira, just the ones who mattered. The room smelled like cake and coffee, and there was laughter bouncing off the walls, real and warm, not the fake stuff I'd gotten used to. I'd set up a few tables, nothing fancy, just some folding chairs, a spread of food, and a playlist of songs that didn't remind me of her. Leona showed up first, hugging me tight and saying, "You look better, you know that?" I smiled, a real one, not the tight-lipped thing I'd been faking for weeks. "Feel better," I told her. Marcus came next, clapping me on the back and handing me a beer. "Proud of you, man," he said. "Takes guts to burn it all down and walk away." I nodded, popping the cap off. Didn't feel like guts at the time, just felt like surviving. More people trickled in. My cousins, Jake and Sarah, who'd been at the wedding and the blowout, grinning like they were glad to see me standing tall. My buddy Tom from work, who'd texted me every day after Mira left, just to check in. Even my mom showed up, fussing over the food and telling me I needed to eat more. It wasn't a big crowd, maybe 20 people, but it was enough. The room filled up with noise, talking, laughing, the clink of plates, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. We ate, swapped stories, and I let myself relax, leaning back in my chair, watching them all. Leona told everyone how she'd ripped into Clara that night, making them laugh, and Marcus bragged about his sneaky camera work in Scottsdale, calling himself the family spy. It was light, easy, the kind of night I hadn't had since before the wedding. After a while, I stood up, tapping my beer bottle with a spoon to get their attention. The room quieted down, all eyes on me, and I took a deep breath. "Hey, thanks for coming," I said, my voice steady. "I know the last few months have been a lot. You've all seen it, the good, the bad, the ugly, and you're still here. That means something." A few nods, a couple of smiles. I went on. "I thought losing Mira was the end of me, you know? Like I'd failed at the one thing I wanted most. But I figured something out. Sometimes a broken vow is a blessing in disguise." I raised my bottle. To starting over. They cheered, lifting their drinks, and I took a long sip, feeling the words settle in my chest. It wasn't just talk, I meant it. Losing her hurt like hell, but staying tied to that family, to their games and their lies, would have been worse. I sat back down, and the night rolled on. Cake got cut, music got louder, and Jake even dragged me out to dance, laughing when I stepped on his toes. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. As the hours passed, I stepped outside for some air, leaning against the railing where Mira and I had stood that wedding night, looking at the stars. I could still see her in that white dress, smiling up at me, promising forever. For a second, it stung, the memory, the what could have been, but then I let it go. She wasn't here anymore, and I didn't need her to be. I'd spent weeks replaying it all, her laugh with Theo, Clara's smug face, Marshall's cold stares. But tonight, I didn't feel bitter. I felt awake, like I'd finally opened my eyes after a long, bad dream. Leona came out, standing next to me, her hands in her pockets. "You good?" she asked. I nodded, looking out at the dark. "Yeah, better than good." She smiled. "She's still asking about you, you know? Mira called me yesterday, wanted to know if you'd softened up." I shrugged. "Doesn't matter. I'm done looking back." Leona bumped my shoulder. "That's my boy." We stood there a while, quiet, the party noise drifting out behind us. When I went back in, They were still laughing, still eating, still celebrating. I grabbed another slice of cake, sat with Marcus and Tom, and let myself laugh too. This was my ending, not the one I'd planned, not the one with Mira by my side, but a better one. I was free, not just from her, but from the weight of it all, and that was worth toasting to. I knew something wasn't right the moment I felt the stabbing pain in my side. It started as a dull ache earlier in the day, something I brushed off while I handled Grace's breakfast and prepped her for school. But by the afternoon, it became unbearable. I collapsed on the cold kitchen floor, clutching my side, the sharp waves of pain radiating through me. It felt like a knife twisting inside, and as much as I tried to mask it, I knew Grace, my 7-year-old daughter, could see through me. "Daddy, are you okay?" she asked, her tiny voice trembling as she stood a few feet away, her eyes wide with fear. She didn't dare move closer. Perhaps my winces scared her. I tried to reassure her, putting on the strongest voice I could muster, though it barely came out above a whisper. "I'll be okay, Grace. Just a little stomachache." My words were a lie, of course. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a simple stomachache. I was in agony, and the cold sweat beating on my forehead wasn't helping. I needed help. Amelia's footsteps echoed from down the hall. I felt a brief spark of hope. My wife would see me in this state and surely take action. She stepped into the kitchen, her sleek suitcase rolling behind her. She looked ready for her trip with her brother, Daniel, her hair perfectly styled, her expression showing not concern but annoyance. "What are you doing on the floor, Marcus?" she asked, her voice sharp, as if my crumpled form had somehow inconvenienced her. The pain made it hard to speak, but I managed to gasp out, "I think it's appendicitis. It's bad. I need to go to the hospital." Her response was a scoff. "Appendicitis? You're being dramatic. It's probably just indigestion. Why don't you rest for a bit? You'll feel better." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Did she not see me clutching my side, barely able to breathe through the waves of pain? "Amelia, please. I'm serious. I can't move. Grace is here. I need you." She glanced at her watch, the faintest flicker of impatience crossing her face. "Marcus, I don't have time for this. I can't miss my flight with Daniel. Just call Olivia or something. You'll figure it out." With that, she rolled her suitcase out of the kitchen and out of the house, leaving me there on the floor with Grace standing by, tears streaming down her face. "Daddy, don't be sick," she whimpered, finally rushing to my side and taking my hand in her small one. Her touch brought me comfort, but it also fueled my desperation. I couldn't let her see me like this for long. I had to do something. I fumbled for my phone with trembling hands, scrolling through my contacts until I found Olivia's name. My sister had always been there for me, and now I had no choice but to lean on her again. When she picked up, her voice was a mix of confusion and concern. "Marcus, what's going on?" "Olivia," I rasped, the effort to speak draining me. "I think it's appendicitis. I can't move, and Grace is terrified. Amelia, she left. I need help." There was a brief silence on the other end before her voice came back, steady and firm. "Stay right there. I'm coming now. Just hold on." The relief I felt at her words was immense, but it was quickly overshadowed by a wave of anger and hurt. Amelia had abandoned me when I needed her the most. The woman I thought would always be my partner, my support, had chosen her trip over me, over Grace. As I leaned back against the cold tile, clutching Grace's hand while we waited for Olivia, one thing became clear. This wasn't something I could just forget or forgive. Amelia's decision to leave me in this state spoke louder than any argument we'd ever had. It wasn't just about the pain in my side anymore. It was about the fracture in our marriage, one I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. When Olivia arrived minutes later, rushing in and helping me to my feet, I felt a surge of gratitude for her. But even as she helped me into her car and drove us to the hospital, I couldn't shake the bitter truth Amelia's actions had revealed. I couldn't rely on her when it truly mattered, and that realization was a wound deeper than anything happening in my body. Lying in that hospital bed, staring at the sterile white walls and listening to the rhythmic beeping of the machines, I felt a strange mix of relief and anger. Relief because the surgery had been successful, My appendix had been on the verge of rupturing, the doctor said. If I had waited any longer, the situation could have been life-threatening. And anger because the person who should have been there for me, who should have rushed me to the hospital herself, wasn't. Amelia hadn't called. Not once. Not even to check if I was alive. My sister Olivia had stepped up without hesitation. She'd driven me to the hospital, stayed with Grace until my parents arrived, and even updated them on my condition while I was in surgery. She did everything Amelia should have done, but didn't. When I woke up, Olivia was there by my side, looking worried but relieved to see me awake. "You scared us, Marcus," she said softly, her hand resting on mine. I smiled weakly, the effort exhausting. "Thanks for being here, Olivia. I don't know what I would have done without you." She smiled back, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Don't thank me. This is what family does. I don't understand why Amelia didn't stay. I mean, Marcus, this is serious." "You could have," she stopped herself, shaking her head. "Never mind." Her words hung in the air long after she left the room. I knew what she wanted to say. I'd been thinking it myself. Amelia's absence wasn't just a moment of poor judgment. It was a betrayal. A betrayal of the vows we took, of the promises we made to always stand by each other. The doctor came in later to check on me, explaining how close I'd come to a major emergency. I nodded along, but I wasn't really listening. My mind was stuck on Amelia. I replayed the moment in the kitchen over and over, her dismissive words like daggers in my chest. When my parents arrived with Grace, her face lit up the moment she saw me. She ran to my bedside, climbing up carefully so she could sit beside me. "Daddy, are you all better now?" she asked, her little hands gripping mine tightly. I pulled her into a hug, holding her as tightly as I could manage. "I'm getting there, sweetheart. I'll be okay." Her presence was comforting, but it also reminded me of the responsibility I had. I couldn't let her grow up in an environment where she learned that neglect and indifference were acceptable. My parents stayed quiet, but their faces spoke volumes. My mom, always so reserved, looked like she wanted to say something. My dad, on the other hand, was fuming. "Marcus, where's Amelia? Why isn't she here?" he finally asked, his voice low and controlled, though I could sense the anger simmering beneath. I hesitated. "She's away, on a trip with Daniel." That was all it took for my dad to explode. "A trip? While you're in the hospital? Does she even know how close you came to?" "Dad, please," I interrupted, not wanting Grace to hear the argument brewing. "Let's not do this now." He looked like he wanted to argue, but my mom placed a hand on his arm, silently urging him to back down. The next few days were quiet. My parents took care of Grace while I recovered, and Olivia visited often to make sure I was okay. Amelia? Nothing. No calls, no texts, not a single sign of concern. I wanted to believe there was some explanation, some reason for her behavior. Maybe she was overwhelmed or didn't understand how serious my condition was. But deep down, I knew the truth. She had made a choice that day, a choice to leave me and Grace behind for her own convenience. By the time I was discharged and back home, the physical pain had dulled, but the emotional wound remained raw. Seeing Grace's face light up when I walked through the door was the only thing that made me smile. "Daddy, you're back," she cried, running into my arms. "You're not sick anymore, right?" "I'm much better now," I said, holding her close. But even as I said it, I knew that better was a relative term. Physically, I was healing. Emotionally, I was unraveling. Amelia's absence during my time of need wasn't something I could just shrug off. It had left a mark, a deep cut that I couldn't ignore. As I tucked Grace into bed that night, I sat by her side, stroking her hair as she drifted off to sleep. I thought about the promises I had made to Amelia when we got married, about the family we were supposed to be building together. And then I thought about her suitcase rolling out of the kitchen, her dismissive words echoing in my ears. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but one thing was clear. Something had to change. I couldn't keep living like this, half supported, half loved. Amelia had made her choice. Now, I had to figure out mine. By the time Amelia returned from her trip, I thought I had prepared myself for the conversation we were about to have. I thought I'd worked through the anger and disappointment, But the moment the front door banged open and her voice filled the house, all those emotions came flooding back. "Marcus, why didn't you pick us up yesterday? Daniel and I had to spend extra on a taxi and train fares," she yelled, her frustration echoing down the hall. I was in the living room with Grace, helping her color a picture she'd been working on. Amelia stormed in, her suitcase trailing behind her, Daniel right on her heels. Both of them looked indignant, as if I'd somehow wronged them. I stood up slowly, my body still recovering from the surgery. "Welcome back," I said, my voice cold and steady. "Must have been a tough trip." Amelia stopped in her tracks, her expression shifting to surprise at the tone in my voice. "What's with the attitude?" she demanded. I couldn't hold it back any longer. "Attitude? Amelia, while you were off enjoying your trip, I was in the hospital. I nearly died." My voice was calm, but the anger simmered just below the surface. Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly recovered, brushing me off with a wave of her hand. "You're fine now, though, right? It couldn't have been that serious." I felt something snap inside me. "Not that serious? My appendix was about to rupture, Amelia. If it weren't for Olivia, I don't even know if I'd still be here." "And where were you?" "On a trip with your brother, acting like I don't even exist." Daniel, usually so smug and confident, shifted uncomfortably. "Hey man, don't bring me into this. I didn't know anything about." I cut him off with a glare. "You didn't know because she didn't care enough to tell you. You both abandoned me when I needed you the most." Amelia's face reddened. "You're being dramatic. You always make a big deal out of nothing." Before I could respond, the front door opened again. I turned to see Olivia walking in with my parents and Amelia's parents right behind her. I'd called them earlier, explaining everything, and they had all agreed to come. Now, as they filed into the room, the air grew heavy with tension. "What's everyone doing here?" Amelia asked, her voice faltering slightly as she took in the stern expressions on their faces. My dad was the first to speak. "We're here because Marcus told us what happened." "Amelia, how could you leave him like that? How could you leave your husband and your daughter alone when he was in so much pain?" Amelia looked around, clearly taken aback by the collective disappointment directed at her. I didn't know it was that serious," she said weakly. "That's not an excuse," Olivia snapped, her voice sharp. "You didn't even bother to check. You just left. And let's not pretend this is the first time you've put your own plans above your family." Daniel, who had been trying to stay out of the conversation, finally spoke up. "Look, maybe she made a mistake, but it's not like Marcus was dying." "Enough," my mom said firmly, cutting him off. "This isn't just about what happened this time. It's about a pattern of behavior. Amelia, you've been putting Marcus and Grace last for a long time now, and we're tired of watching it." Amelia's parents, who had been silent until now, looked at their daughter with a mix of sadness and disappointment. "Amelia," her mother began, "we raised you to take care of your family, to be there for them. What you did, it's not right." Amelia crossed her arms defensively, her gaze darting between everyone in the room. "So what? You're all just going to gang up on me now? I made a mistake, okay? It's not the end of the world." "It is for me," I said quietly, but firmly. The room fell silent as I met her gaze. "Because this isn't just about one mistake. It's about every time I've had to pick up the pieces while you prioritized your own wants over our family. It's about the fact that I can't trust you to be there when it really matters." Amelia opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. For once, she didn't have a quick retort or a dismissive comment. She just stood there, staring at me as the weight of my words sank in. The silence was broken by my dad, who turned to Amelia's parents. "You should talk to your daughter, because if something doesn't change, I don't see how this marriage can survive." With that, the meeting ended. One by one, everyone left, their disappointment hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Amelia didn't say a word as she walked to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. Daniel muttered something about heading home and left without another word. I sat back down with Grace, who had been quietly watching from the couch. She climbed into my lap and wrapped her arms around me. "It's okay, Daddy," she whispered. "I'm here." And in that moment, I realized she was the only person I could count on. Something had shifted. and there was no going back. Amelia's actions had pushed us to the edge, and now it was up to me to decide what came next. The days after the confrontation felt like walking through a fog. Amelia tried to act as if nothing had happened, but the silence between us was thick and oppressive. She avoided me, which was fine. I didn't have much to say to her. The damage was done, and there was no undoing it. I spent my time reflecting, replaying every moment of our marriage in my head. I thought about the times I had been there for her without hesitation, supporting her through every challenge, big or small. And then I thought about how she had walked out on me, dismissing my pain as if it were nothing, leaving Grace and me to fend for ourselves. It wasn't just one moment of neglect. It was the culmination of years of feeling like I came second, or even third, to her wants and her brother's demands. This wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a partnership in name only. One evening, as Grace was asleep and the house was quiet, I sat at the dining table with a folder in front of me. Inside were the divorce papers I had picked up earlier that day. I hadn't told anyone yet, not my parents, not Olivia, because I needed to be certain. Amelia walked into the room, her phone in hand, scrolling as if she didn't have a care in the world. When she saw me sitting there, she paused. "What's with this serious face, Marcus?" I looked up at her, my heart pounding in my chest. I had rehearsed this moment in my head, but now that it was here, I felt a lump forming in my throat. Still, I pushed through. "We need to talk." She sighed dramatically, setting her phone down on the counter. "What now? Can't we just move on from all this?" I slid the folder across the table toward her. "No, Amelia, we can't just move on. I've thought about this, and I can't do it anymore. I want a divorce." For a moment, her face froze in disbelief. Then she let out a laugh, cold, harsh, and mocking. "A divorce? Don't be ridiculous, Marcus. You're overreacting. You always do." I leaned forward, my hands resting on the table to steady myself. "This isn't an overreaction, Amelia. This is me finally standing up for myself and for Grace. You've made it clear where your priorities lie, and they're not with us. I can't keep living like this." Her expression shifted, anger replacing the mockery. "Oh, so you think you can manage without me? Do you have any idea how hard it'll be out there? You're not exactly rolling in money, Marcus." Her words were meant to wound, but I didn't flinch. I had anticipated this. I'd rather struggle every day than spend another moment feeling invisible in my own marriage. At least I'll know I'm doing it for Grace, not for someone who doesn't care. Amelia's eyes narrowed, her face twisting into a sneer. "Fine, go ahead. Divorce me. Let's see how well you do on your own. Don't come crawling back when you realize what a mistake you've made." Her arrogance only solidified my decision. "This isn't a mistake, Amelia. Staying would be the mistake. And for the record, I'm not crawling back. Not now, not ever." She stormed out of the room, slamming the bedroom door behind her. I stayed at the table for a long time, staring at the papers in front of me. Part of me felt relief. Finally, I was taking control of my life. But another part of me felt a deep sadness. This wasn't how I had envisioned my marriage ending, but it was the reality I had to face. The next morning, I filed the paperwork. It wasn't an easy process, but each signature, each document, felt like a step forward. My parents and Olivia were supportive, though I could see the sadness in their eyes. They had hoped for reconciliation, but they also understood why it wasn't possible. Amelia, on the other hand, was livid. She alternated between ignoring me completely and throwing snide comments my way whenever we crossed paths. "You think you're so noble, don't you?" she hissed one evening as I was helping Grace with her homework. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. My actions spoke louder than any argument we could have. For the first time in years, I felt like I was reclaiming my life. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt and fear, but deep down, I knew I was doing the right thing. This wasn't just about me, it was about Grace. She deserved to grow up in a home where love and respect were the foundations, not resentment and neglect. Amelia had made her choice, and now I was making mine. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I could finally breathe, finally hope, and finally be the father Grace deserved. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it, one step at a time. Filing for divorce was one thing. Dealing with the aftermath was something else entirely. The process itself was grueling, not just because of the legalities, but because of Amelia's relentless efforts to undermine me. She wasn't just angry. She was determined to make me regret my decision, and she wasn't pulling any punches. At first, she played the victim, painting me as the unreasonable one. Marcus just decided he couldn't handle being a husband anymore, she told our mutual friends, conveniently leaving out the part where she'd left me on the kitchen floor in agony. Some of them believed her, others didn't, but I couldn't afford to waste energy defending myself. My focus had to stay on Grace and our future. Amelia's tactics escalated quickly. She became dismissive during mediation meetings, shrugging off agreements and refusing to compromise on anything. "I want the house," she declared during one of the first sessions, her tone cold and final. "You can find somewhere else to live." I didn't argue. I wasn't about to fight for a house that no longer felt like a home. My priority was ensuring stability for Grace, not clinging to material things that had lost their meaning. But her next move was harder to stomach. "You're not fit to have full custody," Amelia announced during another meeting, her words sharp and calculated. "You can barely manage on your own, and Grace needs consistency." Her audacity stunned me. The same woman who had left me to fend for myself during a medical emergency was now questioning my ability to care for our daughter. "Amelia," I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could, "Grace needs someone who puts her first. That's never been you." The mediator tried to keep things civil, but it was clear that Amelia wasn't interested in resolution. She wanted to punish me. Every comment, every demand, was designed to push me to my breaking point. But I refused to give her the satisfaction. Instead, I leaned on the support system I'd always had, my parents, Olivia, and even a few close friends who saw through Amelia's facade. Olivia became my rock during this time, helping me navigate the legal maze and reminding me of why I was doing this. "Don't let her wear you down," she said one evening as we worked through paperwork at my kitchen table. "You're stronger than she thinks." I clung to those words during the hardest moments, like the day Amelia decided to involve Grace. "Daddy wants to take you away from me," she told her, tears streaming down her face in a performance worthy of an Oscar. Grace, confused and scared, came to me later that evening. "Daddy, is that true? Do you want me to live with you and not Mommy?" Kneeling in front of her, I held her hands and looked into her wide, innocent eyes. "Sweetheart, I want you to be happy and safe. That's all I've ever wanted. No matter what happens, I'll always be here for you." It wasn't easy watching Grace try to make sense of the situation, but I knew I had to remain patient and steady for her sake. The divorce wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about creating a healthier, more stable life for my daughter. As the weeks turned into months, Amelia's facade began to crack. Her arrogance gave way to frustration as she realized I wasn't backing down. The community started to take notice, too. Stories of her neglect and selfishness began to circulate thanks to Olivia and a few well-placed conversations. Amelia had always cared about appearances, and now those appearances were crumbling. Despite everything, I stayed focused on moving forward. I found a smaller, cozier place for Grace and me, a rental that felt more like a fresh start than the house ever had. I also began building a routine that gave Grace the consistency she needed. School drop-offs, homework sessions, bedtime stories. These small moments became the foundation of our new life, a reminder of what I was fighting for. The legal process was exhausting, but each step felt like progress. Every signed document, every agreement reached, brought me closer to freedom. Amelia's attempts to intimidate me no longer had the power they once did. I could see her for who she really was, a woman desperate to control a situation that was slipping through her fingers. One day, during yet another heated meeting, Amelia leaned across the table and sneered, "You think you're winning, don't you? You think you're so noble. But let me tell you something, Marcus. You'll regret this. You're nothing without me." Her words stung, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I met her gaze and replied, "I'd rather struggle every day than spend another moment in a marriage where I feel invisible. This isn't about winning, Amelia. It's about doing what's right for Grace and me." For the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear, Maybe, or the realization that she couldn't control me anymore. Whatever it was, it didn't last long. She quickly masked it with a scoff and leaned back in her chair, but I knew I'd struck a nerve. The divorce wasn't finalized yet, but I could feel the tide shifting. I was no longer the man who lay on the kitchen floor, desperate and powerless. I was reclaiming my life, one hard-fought step at a time. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was walking towards something better. The shift in Amelia's demeanor was subtle at first, small cracks in her confidence that were easy to miss. But as the weeks went by, those cracks widened, revealing the person beneath the polished facade. The community, our friends, and even her workplace were starting to see her for who she truly was, and she didn't like it. Word of our divorce had spread faster than I expected, though I wasn't surprised. People love gossip, and a divorce is always a hot topic. Olivia had been instrumental in setting the record straight whenever Amelia tried to twist the narrative. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She told anyone who asked how Amelia had abandoned me during a medical emergency and prioritized her own trip over her family. At first, Amelia brushed it off, convinced she could charm her way out of the situation. She'd been good at that for years, winning people over with her wit and charisma. But this time, it wasn't working. Her colleagues began to notice her irritability and short temper. Friends who once admired her started distancing themselves, their smiles becoming polite but strained. Amelia's brother, Daniel, wasn't faring much better. The two of them had always been thick as thieves, but even their bond was showing signs of strain. One evening, while picking Grace up from a playdate, I overheard them arguing outside his apartment. "You're the reason everything's falling apart," Daniel shouted, his voice loud enough for the entire block to hear. "Oh, don't you dare blame me," Amelia snapped back. "You were there too. Don't act like you're innocent in all this." The sound of their voices rising and falling was oddly satisfying. For years, they'd been a united front, always putting their plans and priorities above mine. Now, they were tearing each other apart. At the same time, Amelia's professional life was unraveling. She'd always been proud of her job, boasting about her achievements and her ability to balance work and family. But the truth was, her neglectful behavior at home was starting to bleed into her work. Deadlines were missed, meetings were forgotten, and her once impeccable reputation began to crumble. One of her colleagues, who happened to be an old friend of mine, confided in me over coffee one afternoon. "Marcus, I don't know what's going on with Amelia, but she's not the same person she used to be. People are starting to talk. It's not good." I wasn't surprised, but hearing it confirmed felt like vindication. Amelia had built her identity around being successful and admired, but now that image was falling apart. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my life. Grace and I settled into our new routine, and though it wasn't always easy, there was a sense of peace in our home that hadn't been there in years. Grace seemed happier too, her laughter more frequent, her smiles brighter. One day, while dropping her off at school, I noticed a group of parents whispering nearby. I caught snippets of their conversation. My name, Amelia's name, words like abandoned and divorce. I could feel their eyes on me as I walked Grace to her classroom. It stung, but not as much as I thought it would. Let them talk, I told myself. They didn't know the full story, and even if they did, their opinions didn't matter. What mattered was Grace and the life I was building for us. Amelia, on the other hand, wasn't handling the judgment as well. She'd always cared deeply about what people thought of her, and now, she couldn't escape the whispers and side glances. Her once loyal friends were avoiding her, and even her parents seemed distant. One evening, while Grace was at Olivia's house, I drove past Amelia's place and saw her and Daniel arguing again, this time in the driveway. Their voices were muffled, but their body language said it all: accusations, frustration, blame. The two people who had once been so united were now at each other's throats, each trying to shift responsibility for the mess they'd created. The following week, I heard through the grapevine that Amelia had been demoted at work. Her boss had apparently grown tired of her declining performance and decided it was time for a change. For someone like Amelia, whose identity was so tied to her career, it was a devastating blow. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. She had made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences. The final nail in the coffin came during a school event. Grace's teacher had invited parents to join a small celebration in the classroom. Amelia showed up late, looking frazzled and out of place. When she tried to engage with the other parents, they offered her polite smiles but quickly moved on. I stood near the back, watching as she realized the warmth and admiration she'd once received were gone. She caught my eye, her expression a mix of anger and sadness, but I didn't look away. I wanted her to see that I wasn't the same man she had dismissed and belittled. As Grace and I walked out together, she hugged my leg and looked up at me. "Daddy, I'm glad you were here," she said with a bright smile. "I'll always be here, sweetheart," I replied, lifting her into my arms. Amelia had spent years tearing me down, but now she was the one crumbling. And though I wasn't one to celebrate someone's downfall, I couldn't deny the sense of justice in seeing her finally face the consequences of her actions. She had made her choices, and now, so had I. The first morning in our new place felt surreal. The house was smaller, cozier, but it already felt more like a home than the one I'd left behind. Grace was still asleep, curled up in her new bed, while I stood in the kitchen, sipping coffee and looking around. The silence was different here, not oppressive like before, but peaceful. It was the sound of a fresh start. Rebuilding my life after the divorce wasn't easy. I had to let go of the anger, the resentment, and the frustration that had built up over the years. I had to focus on what mattered most, Grace. She was my anchor, the one constant in all this chaos, and I was determined to give her the stability she deserved. The first big step was finding a job. I'd been out of the workforce for years, relying on Amelia's income while I focused on raising Grace. Now, I had to step up. My resume wasn't exactly impressive. It had gaps that couldn't be ignored, but I was willing to work hard and prove myself. After weeks of searching and countless interviews, I landed a position at a small accounting firm. The owner, Clara, was a single mother herself, and she understood the challenges I was facing. "We'll take it one step at a time," she said during my final interview. "You'll find your rhythm, and we'll be here to support you." The job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and the environment was welcoming. I worked hard, learning as much as I could, and over time, I started to feel confident again. I wasn't just surviving. I was building something meaningful for Grace and me. Grace, for her part, adapted quicker than I expected. She loved our new neighborhood, especially the park just a block away. She made friends easily, her laughter filling the air as she played on the swings or chased butterflies. Seeing her happy reminded me why I was doing all this. One evening, as we sat on the living room floor eating pizza, Grace looked up at me and said, "Daddy, I like it here. It feels like home." Her words brought tears to my eyes. I leaned over and kissed her forehead. "I'm glad, sweetheart. This is our home now." Of course, not everything was perfect. The whispers and gossip in the community hadn't stopped. At school drop-offs and pickups, I could feel the judgmental stares and hear the hushed conversations. "That's Marcus," they'd say. "You know, the one who got divorced. His wife left him." It hurt, but I refused to let it affect me. Grace needed me to be strong, and I wasn't about to let small-minded people bring me down. Olivia, as always, was my biggest cheerleader. She'd call me after hearing some new rumor and laugh it off. "Let them talk," she'd say. "You're doing great, and that's all that matters." Amelia's downfall continued, though I tried not to dwell on it. I heard from mutual acquaintances that her workplace had demoted her, and she was struggling to maintain the lifestyle she'd once flaunted. Daniel had distanced himself from her, and even her parents were less involved in her life. She was becoming a shadow of the person she once was. One day, while picking Grace up from school, Amelia showed up. She looked worn out, her usual polished appearance replaced with tired eyes and a forced smile. Grace ran to me first, hugging me tightly before turning to her mother. "Hi, Mommy," she said hesitantly. Amelia knelt down and hugged her, but the interaction felt strained. She glanced at me, her expression unreadable. "Marcus, can we talk?" she asked quietly. I nodded, stepping to the side while Grace played nearby. "What's on your mind?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She hesitated, looking down at her hands. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. The words caught me off guard. Amelia wasn't one to admit fault, let alone apologize. But as much as I wanted to hear those words years ago, now they felt hollow. Too little, too late. I appreciate that, I said, my voice steady. But things are different now. Grace and I are moving forward, and I need to focus on that. She nodded, her shoulders slumping slightly. I understand. As she walked away, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and closure. For the first time, I truly felt like I was leaving the past behind. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. Work became more fulfilling as I grew in my role, and Grace thrived in her new environment. Our home was filled with laughter and love, a stark contrast to the tension and neglect we'd left behind. One evening, as I sat by the window watching Grace play in the yard, I reflected on how far we'd come. The road had been tough, filled with pain and uncertainty, but it had led us here, a place of peace and hope. I wasn't the same man I'd been when this journey began. I was stronger, more confident, and finally free to build the life Grace and I deserved. Rebuilding a life from the ground up isn't easy, but it's worth it. And as I watched Grace's laughter fill the air, I knew I'd made the right choice. We were finally home. The quiet of the evening was something I hadn't realized I missed until it became a regular part of my life. Grace was asleep in her room, her soft breathing the only sound in the house. I sat by the window, a cup of coffee in my hands, staring out at the stars. The past few months had been a whirlwind of emotions, challenges, and change, but sitting there in the stillness, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. I thought back to where it all started. The cold kitchen floor, the pain ripping through my body, and the realization that Amelia wasn't coming back to help me. That moment had been a wake-up call, forcing me to see the truth I'd been ignoring for years. Our marriage had been crumbling for a long time, but I'd convinced myself that things would get better. They never did. It wasn't just about Amelia leaving me in that moment of need. It was about the countless other times she prioritized herself, her brother, or her career over our family. It was about the dismissive remarks, the indifference, and the way I always felt like an afterthought. I had spent so much time trying to hold everything together that I hadn't realized how much of myself I'd lost in the process. But now, sitting here in this small, cozy home with Grace sleeping peacefully in the next room, I realized how far I'd come. I wasn't the man who had begged for scraps of attention or understanding. I wasn't the man who had settled for being invisible in his own marriage. I was someone new, someone stronger. The road to this point hadn't been easy. The divorce proceedings had been brutal, with Amelia fighting me every step of the way. She had tried to tear me down, questioning my ability to parent Grace, mocking my decision to leave her, and spreading lies to anyone who would listen. But through it all, I held firm. Not because it was easy, but because I knew what I was fighting for. A better life for Grace and me. And now, here we were, living that better life. It wasn't perfect. There were still whispers and judgment from the community, and there were days when the weight of it all felt like too much. But every time I saw Grace's smile, heard her laugh, or watched her thrive in our new environment, I knew I'd made the right choice. Reflecting on Amelia's downfall, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. She had always been so sure of herself, so convinced that she was untouchable. But the cracks in her facade had been exposed, and now she was the one struggling to keep up appearances. I didn't revel in her pain, but I couldn't deny the satisfaction of seeing her face the consequences of her actions. Still, this wasn't about her anymore. It was about me, about Grace, and about the life we were building together. I thought about all the little victories we'd had in the past few months. Grace making new friends at school, my first paycheck from my new job, the nights we spent curled up on the couch watching movies. These moments, as small as they seemed, were everything. They were proof that we could move forward, that we could find happiness and stability on our own. As I sat there, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. For Olivia, who had been my rock through all of this. For my parents, who had stepped in when I needed them the most. For Grace, whose resilience and joy reminded me of why I was fighting so hard. And even for myself, for finding the strength to leave a toxic situation and start over. I took a deep breath, letting the cool night air fill my lungs. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, that didn't scare me. If I could survive everything I'd been through, Amelia's betrayal, the grueling divorce, the whispers and judgment, I could handle whatever came next. The sound of Grace stirring in her room pulled me out of my thoughts. I set my coffee cup down and walked to her door, peeking inside. She was still asleep, her face peaceful and her tiny hand clutching the edge of her blanket. I smiled, my heart swelling with love and determination. This was what mattered. Not the past, not the whispers, not Amelia's attempts to tear me down. Grace was my priority, and everything I did from here on out would be for her. She deserved a father who was present, loving, and strong. And I was determined to be that father. As I turned off the light and closed her door, I felt a sense of closure. The chapter with Amelia was over, and a new one was beginning. It was a chapter one would write on my own terms, filled with hope, love, and resilience. The road ahead might still have challenges, but I was ready to face them. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own story. And this time, I was determined to make it a good one. It started with a knock at the door late one afternoon. I wasn't expecting anyone, and Grace was at Olivia's house for the weekend, giving me a rare moment of peace. I opened the door, and there she was, Amelia. For a moment, I was stunned. She looked nothing like the woman I had once married. Her usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by slumped shoulders and tired eyes. "Marcus," she began, her voice quieter than I had ever heard it. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to close the door in her face and be done with it, but another part of me, the part that once loved her, wanted to hear her out. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let her in. Amelia walked into the living room, glancing around as if seeing it for the first time. The simplicity of the space seemed to throw her off, but I didn't offer any explanation. I stayed standing, waiting for her to speak. She finally turned to face me, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened," she started, her voice trembling slightly, "and I realized I owe you an apology. For everything." I crossed my arms, keeping my expression neutral. "What exactly are you apologizing for, Amelia?" She swallowed hard, looking down at the floor. "For abandoning you when you needed me. For not being the wife or partner you deserved. For putting my own needs first. I was selfish, Marcus, and I see that now." Her words hung in the air, but they didn't have the impact she probably thought they would. Months ago, I might have clung to them, desperate for her to finally acknowledge the pain she caused. But now, they felt hollow. Too late, too rehearsed. "Why now?" I asked, my tone steady. "Why are you apologizing now, Amelia? Because you've truly changed? Or because you've realized the life you built is falling apart?" She flinched, my words clearly hitting their mark. "It's not like that," she said quickly, but the hesitation in her voice betrayed her. I miss us. I miss what we had." I shook my head, letting out a bitter laugh. "What we had? Amelia, we haven't had anything real in years. You made sure of that every time you dismissed me, every time you put yourself and Daniel above Grace and me." She took a step closer, her eyes pleading. "I know I messed up, Marcus, but I want to make things right. For Grace. For us." I could feel my anger rising, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Make things right?" I repeated. "Amelia, you can't just walk back into my life and expect everything to go back to the way it was. You didn't just mess up, you broke something. And I've spent the last few months picking up the pieces and building something better for Grace and me." Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't feel the sympathy I once would have. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," she said, her voice cracking, "but I'm asking for another chance. Please, Marcus." For a moment, I considered her words, not because I wanted to take her back, but because I wanted to be sure of my decision. This was a woman I had once loved, the mother of my child. But as I stood there, staring at her tear-streaked face, I realized that whatever love I had for her was gone. It had been replaced by something stronger, self-respect. "I'm sorry, Amelia," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. but I've moved on. Grace and I have found a life that works for us, and I'm not willing to jeopardize that. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine." Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time, she seemed to accept that she wasn't going to get the response she wanted. "I understand," she whispered, wiping at her eyes. I'm sorry, Marcus, for everything." "Thank you," I said simply. "I hope you can find peace with yourself, Amelia, but this is the end of the road for us." She nodded slowly, her gaze lingering on me for a moment before she turned and walked out the door. I closed it behind her, leaning against it for a moment as I took a deep breath. The emotions were there: anger, sadness, even a small flicker of pity, but they didn't consume me. Instead, I felt a sense of closure. This chapter of my life, with all its pain and heartache, was finally over. When Grace came home later that evening, her laughter filled the house as she told me about the adventures she had with Olivia. I listened intently, my heart full as I realized just how far we had come. Amelia's attempt at reconciliation was a reminder of the past, but it didn't define our future. Grace and I were moving forward, step by step, into a life that was brighter and stronger than anything I could have imagined. Amelia had been a part of my story, but now I was the one writing the next chapter, and I wasn't looking back.